Hello, I am JJ Arthur, and today I will be discussing the telegraph. I will begin my presentation with an introductory video. I will then move on to discuss the history behind the telegraph, the electric telegraph, Morse code, and the rise and fall of the use of the telegraph. I will then discuss the impact this invention had. This is where I will discuss James Cary's ideas on its impact on communication. My bibliography will be provided at the very end of my presentation. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy. You may be thinking, the telegraph, what a strange topic. But this topic isn't so strange because the telegraph laid the groundwork for how we communicate today. I think the telegraph is an important invention, and it is one that piqued my interest years ago. In 1995, the movie Balto was released and depicted a scene in which a telegraph is used to communicate about the transportation of medicine. This scene I am about to play you caught my attention many years ago and made me want to learn more about this invention.
Anchorage. Stop. Repeat. Urgent request. More diphtheria antitoxin. Stop. Known in grave danger. Stop. Please help. Stop. Pack ice closing in. Cannot ship antitoxin, I see. We'll try by air. No. Storm at airport. Planes grounded until storm clears. Many regrets. From Juneau, Office of the Governor. We are shipping antitoxin by rail. Stop. Train line ends at town of Nanana. Stop. Select fastest dogs for sled team to carry antitoxin from Nanana to Nome. Stop. God willing, train will make it through. Stop.
The telegraph was invented in the 1830s and 1840s. This invention revolutionized long-distance communication. You may be thinking, but how does it work? The telegraph works by transmitting electrical signals over a wire laid between stations. In the Balto video, this transmission was displayed as the one station was communicating with other stations about how the medicine couldn't be transported. On May 24, 1844, Morse sent his first telegraph message from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore, Maryland. Morse sent Vail the historic first message, "What hath God wrought?" By 1866, a telegraph line had been laid across the Atlantic Ocean from the U.S. to Europe. Now let's watch and listen to the first telegraph message sent. In the early 19th century, two developments in the field of electricity opened the door for the production of the electric telegraph. In 1800, the Italian physicist Alessandro Volta invented the battery, which reliably stored an electric current and allowed the current to be used in a controlled environment. Then, in 1820, the Danish physicist Hans Ørsted demonstrated the connection between electricity and magnetism by deflecting a magnetic needle with an electric current. The credit for inventing the telegraph generally falls on two sets of researchers, Sir William Cooke and Sir Charles Wheatstone in New England, and Samuel Morse, Leonard Gale, and Alfred Vail in the U.S. In the 1830s, the British team of Cooke and Wheatstone developed a telegraph system with 5 magnetic needles that could be pointed around a panel of letters and numbers by using an electric current. Their system was soon being used for railroad signaling in Britain. During this period, Samuel Morse worked to develop an electric telegraph of his own. In collaboration with Gale and Vail, Morse eventually produced a single-circuit telegraph that worked by pushing the operator key down to complete the electric circuit of the battery. This action sent the electric signal across a wire to a receiver at the other end. All the system needed was a key, a battery, a wire, and a line of poles between stations for the wire and a receiver. In the 1830s, Samuel Morse and Alfred Vail created what is known as Morse code. The code assigned letters in the alphabet and numbers a set of dots, short marks, and dashes, long marks, based on the frequency of use. As you can see in the image provided, letters used often, such as E, got a simple code, while others used infrequently, such as Q, got a longer and more complex code. Initially, the code, when transmitted, was translated using marks on a piece of paper that the telegraph operator would then translate back into English. However, it became apparent that the operators could hear and understand the code just by listening to the clicking of the receiver, so the paper was replaced by a receiver that created more pronounced beeping sounds. Morse code can be directly understood by a skilled listener or observer without special equipment. The International Morse code encodes the ISO basic Latin alphabet, some extra Latin letters, the Arabic numerals, and a small set of punctuation and procedural signals as standardized sequences of short and long signals called dots and dashes, or dits and das. Morse code is used by some amateur radio operators. Pilots and air traffic controllers usually need only a cursory understanding of it. Aeronautical navigational aids such as VORs and NDBs constantly identify in Morse code. Morse code is a useful alternative to synthesized speech for sending automated data to skilled listeners on voice channels. In an emergency, Morse code can be sent by improvised methods that can be easily keyed on and off, making it one of the simplest and most versatile methods of telecommunication. The most common distress signal is SOS, which is made up of 3 dots, 3 dashes, and 3 more dots. I've provided a video that shows an example of someone using a telegraph. Follow along as a person translates "Hello World" in Morse code.
Morse code was a method of transmitting textual information as a series of on-off tones that could be directly understood by a skilled listener. Example. Hello World.
In 1843, Morse and Vail received funding from the U.S. Congress to set up and test their telegraph system between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, Maryland. There were 2 major improvements to the telegraph system that led it to spread across America and the world. The invention of good insulation for telegraph wires was invented by Ezra Cornell. Another improvement, by the famed inventor Thomas Edison in 1847, was the quadruplex system, which allowed for 4 messages to be transmitted simultaneously using the same wire. Use of the telegraph was quickly accepted by people eager for a faster and easier way of sending and receiving information. However, widespread and successful use of the device required a unified system of telegraph stations among which information could be transmitted. The Western Union Telegraphy Company, funded in part by Cornell, was one of many companies that developed around the new medium during the 1850s. By 1861, the Western Union had laid the first transcontinental telegraph line, making it the first nationwide telegraph company. Telegraph systems spread across the world as well. Extensive systems appeared across Europe by the later part of the 19th century, and by 1866, the first permanent telegraph cable had been successfully laid across the Atlantic Ocean. Even by the end of the 19th century, however, new technologies began to emerge, many of them based on the same principles first developed for the telegraph system. In time, these 2 new technologies would overshadow the telegraph, which would fall out of regular widespread usage. Most importantly, the telegraph influenced the invention of the telephone. In the United States and Europe, inventors explored ways that electricity could be used to transmit the human voice. The telegraph represented a relatively simple major communication network that only linked telegraph offices. But the telephone was predicated on building a network of connections that was larger and bigger than the telegraph. While people delivered messages to telegraph offices and could have telegrams delivered to them by messenger or collect them at a telegraph office, the telephone involved putting instruments in public places, businesses, and homes, and enabling people to initiate calls themselves. Like the telegraph, the primary benefits of the telephone were to reduce the limits imposed by space on communication between people and to speed up the exchange of information through oral communication. For many people, the telephone was a replacement for the telegraph, but it operated quite differently. The telephone required no skill to operate, such as knowledge of Morse code, and was installed directly in offices and homes for use by the callers. Although the telegraph has since been replaced by the even more convenient telephone, fax machine, and internet, its invention stands as a turning point in world history.
The age of instant communication was born on January 11th, 1838 in Morristown. It was on that date that Samuel Morse and Alfred Vail first demonstrated the electric telegraph at Vail's Speedwell Iron Works. The telegraph was nothing short of a revolution, enabling messages to be sent much faster than previous means, which relied on messengers riding on horseback. Rapid communication served as the foundation for the nation's economic expansion in the 19th century. New Jersey was at the center of the new telecommunications network, linking the major cities along the East Coast. The electric telegraph went on to play a key role in developing New Jersey's reputation for innovation. Thomas Edison's universal stock ticker and his quadruplex telegraph, enabling 4 messages to be sent on a single wire, incorporated the new technology. Edison's successes with these inventions provided him the means to build his renowned Menlo Park Research Facility, and it all started with the dots and dashes of the electric telegraph.
It happened here.
This short clip encompasses many of the impacts the telegraph had. The electric telegraph transformed how wars were fought and won, and how journalists and newspapers conducted business. Rather than taking weeks to be delivered by horse and carriage mail carts, pieces of news could be exchanged between telegraph stations almost instantly. The telegraph also had a profound economic effect, allowing money to be wired across great distances. James Carey was an American communications theorist, media critic, and a journalism instructor. In his 1989 publication, Communication as Culture, James Carey devotes a chapter to an analysis of the telegraph. Carey looks at the telegraph as a means of communication, analyzing its historical background as well as the social and commercial changes that it triggered. The underlying argument in his essay perceives the notion that the telegraph made it possible for the messages to travel faster than people, horses, or trains could deliver them. The telegraph not only allowed messages to be separated from the physical movement of objects, it also allowed communication to control physical processes actively. The telegraph facilitated the growth of monopoly, capitalism, and imperialism, and to a wider extent, the depersonalization of business relations. Before the telegraph, most business decisions were made face-to-face. The relationship between merchant to merchant was overnight transformed into one of buyer-seller and one based on corporate hierarchy. One of the most significant effects that the telegraph had was that it was able to restructure time and space in relation to both social and commercial life. Carey details the ways in which the telegraph initiated changes in how one communicates across distances and over time. Carey states that the telegraph made geography irrelevant in relation to communication. Carey focuses on how time was almost expanded, in a way, as trading time was no longer limited to daylight hours, as one may be trading with someone in another time zone or even in a different hemisphere. James Carey focuses heavily on the significant changes that the telegraph has made to society in relation to the diminishing constraints of space on communication. The insignificance of geography substantially enabled communities to move away from the local and towards the national and international or global. The telegraph allowed people from one side of the world to communicate almost instantaneously with someone on the other side of the world. The telegraph is a very important invention that impacted the way we communicate today. I hope you learned a thing or two and can share this knowledge with others. Thanks for watching.